Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Cyril Stover. In barely 4 days from now, Nigeria will mark its 56th independence anniversary. Now at independence on the 1st of October in 1960, there was great expectation for the emergence of a great modern state in Africa called Nigeria. The journey over the years has been full of ups and downs, beginning with the days of promising agricultural production and even export of produce like cotton, cocoa, rubber, and groundnuts. Added to the significant investments in solid minerals and the payoffs, followed by the oil boom era, there was so much money to spend on infrastructure development and giving the citizens sound education, where, however, challenges like the 1967 Civil War that lasted more than 30 months and which claimed about 2 million lives. Subsequently came issues of militancy, violence, poor leadership, corruption, poverty, and moral decadence. At 56 years of independence, the nation still grapples with fluctuating political stability and socio-economic challenges, particularly the current economic recession, which analysts attribute to poor policy management, weak institutions, and neglect of the agricultural sector, and over-dependence on oil without the expected diversification options. Now, critics say addressed and that Nigeria was built on a faulty foundation. Is this true? And how independent is Nigeria after 56 years? How much has it achieved in the areas of technological advancement and industrialization? And what is the way forward in building a virile nation? These are some of the issues we'll be examining tonight on NTA Tuesday Live. But first, let's get to see this report by Abdullahi Garba Birnin Kudu.
Shall we please stand up for the national anthem?
"56 years in the life of a nation is not a mean achievement, especially in a country like Nigeria, with a large population, multiplicity of ethnic groups and diverse cultural backgrounds, and of course demands and values. That is why anytime the achievements of a sovereign Nigeria is being accessed, the first thing that comes to mind is ability to maintain the status of one united nation. The fact is that Nigeria, like other countries globally, experienced a civil war, but one that has not led to its disintegration. And good enough, its citizens live freely and progressively in states other than their own and abiding in faith, in peace, unity, and progress. Talking about specifics, political observers believe Nigeria has gone a long way in transformation infrastructure-wise from the time the country achieved its nationhood to date.
The milestones over away whatever problems we have had as a country. We had civil war, we had various issues, but I want to say that we've surmounted all the problems and we've come out of them as one indivisible entity.
The number of kilometers of roads have increased significantly, more hospitals constructed, and more importantly, the education sector witnessed massive more than 100 public and private universities. Economy-wise, many may say Nigeria remains not as expected, with more focus to mono-economic policy, much more relying on the oil sector rather than diversifying its abundant resources. But for people like Malam Adamu Chiroma, who served as the first indigenous central bank governor and finance minister, every generation comes with its own challenges. What is required is commitment from both the government and the governed.
In the course of life, you meet things that are pleasant, you meet things that are unpleasant, you meet good leaders, you meet bad leaders, you meet difficult economic situation, you meet pleasant economic situation. So the most important thing is to know that life is not constantly the same for everybody, for every country, all the time.
Politically, Nigeria achieved another feat in the area of joining the League of Nations with full-blown democratic norms. The nation has moved from militarization to successive democratic administrations. This is coupled with the introduction of various electoral reforms to perfect the system, marked with an unprecedented change from one governing political party to another at the federal level.
We're making some progress as a country politically. We're making some, whatever you are seeing now is an advancement. You may look at it as a setback, but we're making progress because we're going to learn from our mistakes.
The active participation of Nigeria in international peacekeeping operations and other global activities has opportunities for the country since its independence, thereby enabling the country to take its rightful place as the most populated black nation. By whatever yardstick, Nigeria has come a long way, 56 years of nationhood, its challenges notwithstanding. Both financial experts and political observers said such challenges are not peculiar to Nigeria. They also chart the way forward.
We have to go back to the land. Is the one source which the Almighty has given us.
For me, we should talk less about those things that divide us and stress more, talk more, dwell more on things that unite us as a nation. It is even in our diversity that we have our strength, really. That is where we have the strength.
As the nation marks 56 years of independence, the good point is both the government and the people being governed agree the future of the country is bright, with more commitment, dedication, and patriotism. Abdullahi Garba Bernukudu, NTA News.
That report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's introduce our guests to you tonight. I'd like to welcome to this program from our Lagos Network Center, former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Professor Bola Akintarenwa, the immediate past Director General of the NIA. Professor Akintarenwa, thanks for joining us here.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
That soldier, former Federal Commissioner for Information and Culture, and that's between 1975 and 1977, a practicing lawyer now, and Waling Garkida. Thanks for being with us here. We're also joined by Dr. Padin Joku, Director General, International Institute of Leadership and Governance, a former university don and chartered mediator and conciliator, as well as a public affairs commentator. Dr. Padin Joku. Always nice to see you.
Good evening, Cyril. Good evening, Nigerians.
Also here tonight is another regular face on this program. Let's welcome Kule Fagbemi, Executive Director of the Center for Peace Building and Socioeconomic Resources Development. Kule Fagbemi is also a political scientist. Kule, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Cyril. Right. Good evening, Nigerians.
All right. At the appropriate time on this program, you can get to join in the discussion in the studio. The numbers call will be on your screen, and we say when you do get through at that time, do us a favor, reduce the volume so that we avoid the hurl back. And we just like to encourage you to go straight to the point, ask, make a comment, and don't bother too much about the greetings. Just go straight to the point. You do know, of course, that the lines can be erratic sometimes, so it's best when you get through to go straight to the point. And whatever issues you raise, I guess will be only too willing to address them. So once again, welcome to NTA Tuesday Live. Let's begin by asking the same question that's been asked over and over again, and that is the national question. And what is this national question? And do we agree that is a national question that should be addressed? Let's begin with Professor Akintarenwa in our Lagos Network Center. Prof.
There is actually an issue of national question. One, national question is comprised of two words: nation, question. In other words, I'm trying to say what makes the question national. If we do not address it from that perspective, it will be very difficult for us to understand the issues. There is national question, and the question basically is the extent to which there is Nigerianness in the minds of Nigerians. Nigerianness is a concept. In other words, as a Nigerian, what does Nigerian mean for each individual, for every citizen? That is the first leg, the first component of the national question. That is precisely the question to which a good answer has not been given, to which analysis have not focused, on. Now, when you look at the national question from this angle, then we can now ask a sub-question from that. According to Professor G.S. Cookie, in his report on political bureau in 1987, he said that 20 years ago, the report was written, was made, was submitted in 1987. 20 years ago, therefore referring to 1967. He said that corruption had become the bane of Nigerian society. All right, an issue. It had become institutionalized. Now, 1967 to 2016, corruption has remained the main problem, militating against progress, against national unity, etc. Now, this same corruption has become a new source, in fact, catalyst in what is creating problem for Nigeria. More significantly, political governance has now been largely predicated on dishonesty of purpose. Now, these are elements of the national question. So I am submitting that if we have not been able to make progress substantially, it is simply because little attention had been focused on all this. People can argue that we have made progress. Yes, we have made progress. The issue is that, scientifically speaking, when one is engaging in an objective analysis, one parameter, a methodological approach, is what is the set objective. When you ask that, the next thing to say is, all right, this is where we are. We have attained this, we have attained that. But in terms of national unity, all right, Nigerianness is not a major issue in the minds of most Nigerians. And this is what we should begin to address and find solution to.
Thank you very much, Prof. Rather comprehensive analysis there. But we'll put the same question to our guests who were here in Abuja. And easily, we heard Prof. Is there a national question from your perspective, General Haruna?
Thank you, and good evening. There is a national question, but this question, in my mind, arises out of two dimensions. One, there is the Nigerian sovereign, internationally recognized federation called Nation of International Nations. Then there are the constituent nations. You call them ethnic nationalities. There are about maybe over 300 of them. Some are classified as major or dominant. Some are classified as minor and dialects. The question arises out of how these 300 so plus Nigerian internal or domestic ethnics bind themselves to be recognized as one sovereign state in the international arena. Nigeria at independence was about 60 million. Now it's about 270 million. By about 2056, it is foreseen that it will be about 500 million in population. Now, how we march to securing the coherence and the patriotism of the Nigerians up to the projected 500 million is a task. It is a challenge that must be solved. We have found solutions so far to have brought us to these 56 years of celebration. It has not been easy. Partially, we have answered some of the questions, and we have designed some solutions, which are not perfect, like running a state on the basis of federal character versus merit. These are ways of facing the challenges, designing appropriate policies. So the question right now has been brought to the fore in national discussion, tagged restructuring. To me, that is a question that is applicable to the question that has arisen: what is the solution to the national question? How do you restructure? How do you devolve the powers? How do you assign responsibilities so that there is equal commitment by all the citizens to peace and security of a Nigerian nation in which they belong?
All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Padinjoku, was it that there was a faulty foundation? Is that what has led to this question that the general and you don't even believe that there is this national question? Where do you stand?
There is a national question, but whether it stems from a faulty foundation is what I don't know. What I do know is that between 1940 and 1960, some committed patriots got together and fought for the independence of this country. In 1960, we got independence. How we have fared since we got independence is actually what constitutes the national question. We were amalgamated in 1914. Between 1914 and now, we spent 102 years as a nation state. 46 years spent under colonialism, 56 years spent as an independent nation. One is tempted to compare whether we were better off as a colonized nation or as an independent nation. However, that crop of patriots, the Macaulays, Azikiwes, Awolowos, Sardaunas, Okparas, and so on and so forth, who fought and died for this country, pursued some ideals which led to independence. Then, when we got independence, we now are suffering from what we call the Alexander the Great syndrome. because Alexander the Great conquered the whole world and got into his started crying one morning. His soldiers came and said, what could be making the greatest man on earth to be crying? He said, there's no more world to conquer. So when we finished with our independence, it seems as if there was no world to conquer except to destroy the independence. And in destroying the independence the way we have let our nationals down, and beyond that, we have let the black world down. Because in your intro, Muhammad Kudu Abubakar did say that this is the most populous black nation in the world. Right. So the question stands, the national question. It must be discussed. Those who are saying shy away from discussing it because they are not helping matters, because we have degraded the quality of the Nigerian.
Okay. We'll return to those issues, and well, the background, of course, which you referred to by Abdullahi Garba Birnin Kudu, of course. Kuli, do we have a national question here to contend with?
From the presentation made already, it is clear that we do have a national question, and that national question does have a lot of sub-questions. And once we agree that we do have sub-questions attached to the major national question, and what is the national question? Do we have a Nigeria within the confines of legal framework of the Constitution and recognized by the international community? There is a Nigeria. Based on that legal framework of the Constitution, you do have citizens that are entitled to be called Nigerians. That said, how many of us see ourselves as a single entity? We do not have an homogeneous nation state. We have a heterogeneous nation state, meaning we have a number of ethno-cultural groups, and these ethno-cultural groups come from diverse backgrounds. Before the amalgamation of Nigeria, as we now know it today, they came in to the Nigerian state from empires and kingdoms that were consolidated and gave a lot of identity to these constituent individuals and citizens of the state. And so their primordial attachments and loyalties. And again, we had the challenge and the misfortune of having to go through the process of reorientation of our belief system with the introduction of the two major religions that are now predominant in the Nigerian state, and that is Christianity and Islam. Once you understand that these issues have come to bear, and then the kind of educational system that we now subscribe to has created another challenge. How do I mean? Before now, we had the informal education with only very few of the ethnic groups and the empires that we do have having a way of documenting and transferring knowledge. But today, you now have another schema for our educational system that has brought in quite a number of issues. And when we introduced education in Nigeria in the last couple of years, you will discover that we started with what was enhancing vocational skills acquisition and professionalism, and making sure that we could attend, one, to those who will provide the intellectual understanding and the foresight, and articulate for those who can provide the technical know-how and provide the services therefrom, and ensure that the other layers in terms of skills set that they will bring to bear were put in place. But unfortunately, we missed it at a particular time. And most of the scholars will always say we started missing it when we changed the nature, the character of our governance approach and methodology to that which began to focus essentially on globalization and globalism, and having the globalist focus with clear preference for global agenda supremacy over local priorities. These are the challenges that we have that has held us captive.
All right, so, but let me put this to Professor in Lagos studio. It's an irony, isn't it, that prior to 1960, and as Dr. Padin Joku said, between 1940 and 1960, people, patriots, if you allow me to use that, got together and said, let us wrest our independence from the colonialists and be self-governing. And I'm saying, isn't it an irony that 56 years after, you're still talking about how can we remain united? So the question is, did we get together to become independent only to break up?
Thank you very much. We didn't attain our political independence for the purposes of fighting ourselves again. And that was why I mentioned earlier on the concept of Nigerianness, which was also raised by my other interlocutors in this case. We had Nigeria, but what does Nigeria mean? That was the issue. You can see, for instance, that at a point in time we fought a civil war, all right, because of the word Nigeria. We have some brothers who refused, all right, to be part. Now, when the war was fought, instead of, I want to use the word panel beating, quote and unquote, all right, Nigeria, so that the same system that brought our patriotic leaders, and you are very right to use the word, they were patriotic. The First Republic politicians, please, all scientific studies have clearly shown that none of them was selfish. Please, Tafawa Balewa worked for Nigeria conscientiously. So did Azikiwe, so did Awolowo, all of them. Now, when you take a look at that, we moved from regionalism to statism. And the problem started from there. But when the problem emerged, nothing was done, all right? People thought that, okay, statism, the politics of it itself, in other words, carving out states from the big regions, will be a solution to the maintenance of the national unity attained on October 1, 1960. But it did not. So in this case, I quite agree with you that yes, it is ironical. At the starting point, the Nigerians, the leaders, were united in fighting the colonialists. Now, when the colonialists left, I admire the Great Alexander Syndrome theory propounded or recalled. He's right. If, for instance, there is no war to fight again, and Alexander was weeping, we now liken that one to the Nigerian case. In other words, to say, well, we fought for independence, but after independence now, there is no fight again, and we are now fighting ourselves. Very good similarity. But the issue is to articulate the dynamics. What was responsible? What was missing? In the case of Great Alexander, there was no war. In our own case, there was still independence to continue to fight for. Independence in no ramifications. So that constitutes another element of the national question that we must pursue to seek understanding to. So I agree with you. There is irony in the whole history.
All right. Okay, General, yes, the patriots served the country. They tried to bequeath legacies, but there are those who argue that along the line, if the older generation had bequeathed a lasting, a sustainable legacy, how come we're still faced with these challenges? In other words, if you put it in simple terms, it's like raising a child and you say you give the child all the necessary guidance. Would you expect that the child would still, growing into adulthood, have the kind of problems that we have in now?
Well, I sympathize with the way we analyze our problems. For example, we talk about fight. We didn't fight for independence. Another, we talk about fighting ourselves. We are not fighting ourselves.
You did for some period of time.
No. No. There are motivations, there are causes. Okay. If we fought ourselves, it was for a cause. We didn't just get up to fight ourselves. But I didn't think, in understanding the development of our country, there is always hard choices and there will always be negotiation. Negotiating Nigeria was what our forebear political leaders did. Negotiating the sustenance of Nigeria as one nation was what brought about the war, the civil war that we had to fight. Why was there this combative negotiation? The professors will tell you the history. I'm a soldier, and I know the reasons that we soldiers had to defend the integrity of what was negotiated in the Nigerian nation with a formula for federalism. So, when the 1966 upheaval came about, we had diverse reasons as to the motives, and we had different understandings as to the instigators that brought about the coup of 1966, followed the Civil War. And again, after we had physically, combatively negotiated for one Nigeria, there was no victor, no vanquished. We were given the opportunity to go back to what our forebears had done, political leaders, negotiate, agree, and move forward. The national question really continues to be asked because progress is a dynamic movement. Culture is dynamic. The lives of people in the 60s that made up Nigeria is not the same as the lives of people who are now Nigeria, population about 170 million. And you cannot expect it to be stagnant for the next 50 years when Nigeria will be about 500 million people. So the challenges will come and go. And what one will observe is that for a developing country, challenges have their bubble time and their burst time and their recovery time. Okay. Exactly what we are now going through, a cycle of wealthy Nigerian oil nation. The bubble is now burst, and we are facing the new challenge. And these are the challenges which must be faced if we are to survive the next 50 years.
Okay, the lines are already open, and we have from Kanu calling in, Kabiru, I believe, calling in from Kanu. Hello. Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, good evening. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead. We're waiting for you to go ahead.
Yeah. The problem facing, right, the problem facing this country is not that of a national question. Nothing like the national question. 3 times our leaders have tried to answer this, to look for the solution, to answer to this national question, and the 3 times they failed. If the last attempt by the last government to have a conference was to answer the national question, I will say there is no question, because the conference has no relevance at all to answer any question at all. Our problem in this country has been very bad leadership and corruption, we have never tried in the last 20 to 35 years these 2 issues. We keep on bringing in bad leaders, corrupt leaders, and we start talking about national question. Where is the question? When you try 3 times to answer the question, you can't see the question. You can't see the question. Don't look at the system. You want to continue for the rest of 400 years, you are looking for the question that you can't answer. So if we can't answer this question, it means we must have to live together. We have to unite. We have to solve the problem of bringing bad leaders, and corruption must be eliminated. If we have to kill those leaders to get our country sanitized from corruption, let's fight corruption. Let's stop this stupid set of leaders coming to our country again to lead us. Let's see what happens after another 20 years and see whether we don't change. But I start looking for imaginary questions. The leaders come, we don't want to stay for years. They tell us there are national questions. You start wasting our time to look for the question that you can't see, you can't answer. For how long are we going to be looking for imaginary questions to answer? So let's say the problem we can see. The one we can see now is bad leadership and corruption. Let's fight that one, and then we see whether another national question will arise after we have fought these 2.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Pari Njoku.
Well, I think I appreciate his contribution. He said we shouldn't be looking for questions, but the issue is pre-independence and the immediate post-independence periods were marked by a mentality, a national mentality of collective prosperity, national well-being, tribal stroke religious accommodation, not tolerance, accommodation. Everybody accommodated the other.
So why are you not doing that now?
Good. Meritocracy and excellence in leadership, which he talked about. Unity, national unity of purpose. We have gone from there now to greed, avarice, tribalism, nepotism, discrimination, exclusionism, tribal and religious intolerance.
Who chose those leaders who introduced these things, those vices you talked about?
I beg to say that the general said at a certain time they had to, we didn't fight, we negotiated. There was a military interregnum that by fiat came in, took certain measures which we have now imbibed and which we don't seem to have completely dropped.
So the cycle probably started with the military.
Yeah, I mean, immediately after the first coup, things fell apart.
Okay. Well, we'll come, it's a good thing General is here, we'll come to that, but Kunle, what are your views on that?
You know, it's always interesting to go back to the Garden of Eden, where they had everything rosy. But Eve gave in to the serpent and ate off the apple,
and eventually gave Adam to eat. But when God came around and asked from Adam, what happened? Rather than answering the simple question of, I ate of the fruit from the tree you asked us not to eat from, he only accused God, Eve, that made him to eat. Interestingly, that's the case of the Nigerian state. We enjoy buck passing and fault finding. And as such, we entered into a phase with the processes of the acculturation that we went through. The processes of the acculturation that we went through led to something that is very interesting. The emergence of an elite class. And that is where Professor Peter Eke had to present the two publics, the thesis and theory of two publics, where you have the civil public and then you have the primordial public. And the allegiances were different. And that is why you'll discover that when people come to the civil public level, at the elite class that is now redefined within the Western world parameters, if they do misbehave, they can go back to their cultural setting, and they dare not even misbehave within their cultural setting. So the moment we started having the elite redefinition of values of the Nigerian people that came into the Nigerian state, we ended up with what is generally called the intra-elite demonization and demystification agenda, which means that you deliberately pick one elite class or individual, try to deconstruct them and demystify, and it is in that process that most of the issues that Dr. Padi Njoku was raising came up. And then we started having the we-they syndrome, and we no longer see eye to eye on issues.
Okay. I'll ask you to hold on a while. We have another caller on the line from Lagos. Emmanuel calling in from Lagos. Hello, Emmanuel.
Hello. Well, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I want to make clarification. I was born just after the Civil War, and I'm trying to listen to what the former military guy has said, that Nigeria was negotiated, that our leaders did not fight for Nigeria. I think that is where our problem comes from. Because if we have fought for this nation, then we can be able to know what it means to build a nation. But because we were offered the platter of gold, then when those earlier leaders left, the subsequent ones take this nation for granted. And that is where the issue of corruption comes in. And I also want to support what the other man has said, that our major issue is the issue of leadership. If we have good leadership, there will be no national question. That is my stake.
All right. Thank you. And still staying in Lagos with Prof. And we should just, since now we have moved into the question of leadership, a caller talked about leadership, and one or two other opinions have alluded to the absence of leadership. So it's we should ask this and say, if those leaders were the kinds of leaders, the ideal leaders we needed at that time to help us negotiate what is Nigeria, did those leaders not put in place a mechanism for raising leaders of like minds? So what did they leave behind? Did they leave and then there was a vacuum? Was there no succession plan in leadership?
Yeah, thank you. You see, let us begin with General IBM Aruna. On the note of how to analyze, what to use for analysis, because that's part of the national question. In policy making, if the methodology is faulty in itself, then there's no way you wouldn't have a bad policy. Now, if General Aruna is saying that the word fight cannot be applicable in terms of analysis, then that one is already a problem in understanding, in explicating what constitutes a national question. And we should link this one to the one interlocutor, either from Lagos, who raised the issue of bad leadership. That is a good hypothesis that is tenable. But the issue is that leadership itself is at best meaningless without followership. Followership and leadership constitute two sides of the same coin. The followership in Nigeria is more problematic the leaders than the leadership system. So when we are talking about vacuum that we are raising, the issue is simply that from various research published so far, there has not been continuity from one regime to the other. We have one administration, whoever is there comes up with various policies. The moment that regime is off the scene, what had been done completely jettisoned, just put in the dustbin of history. Now, as a result, there's problem of vacuum. Second point, political parties, leaders, we do not have politics based on known ideology. When, for instance, during the First Republic, we know the history of IBM Aruna. He's a patriot of the First Order. We have seen his works. When he was part of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs governing board, we know his record. So we have some leaders. Nobody can convince me that IBM Aruna is not a nationalist, a patriot. But now that's at the level of an individual. Leadership in Nigeria has not been collectivized. Even when they present themselves, the leaders, as a group, individual selfish interests, all right, still prevail. That is the issue. So here, I think that the problem is about leadership. It must go pari passu with followership, because without followership, leadership is meaningless. More significantly, when it is argued by one of the interventionists, he was right. He is saying that there is no national question. In fact, leadership itself is an element of the national question. All right? So there is no way. All these are issues in national question. National question just in the singular form, but with many babies, many children inside it.
Thanks, Prof. Back to the phones. We have Ike, who's calling in from Lagos as well. Ike, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Talking about the issue of national question, I want to say that we can trace the problem on our national question even from our Nigerian history. Indeed, in the First Republic, we could notice that we operated through fiscal preservism. And in that time, we did develop very well. And that was essentially because that was what our leaders negotiated for this Nigeria. And indeed, that is where the issue of national question lies. At the time, we should notice that when the military came, they imposed unitary system of government or not, which we are still deceitfully operating as through federalism. And unless we change to what our leaders actually gave us, which is through fiscal federalism, we cannot develop this country. And we continue to riot, we continue to... That is the root of what is happening to us in Nigeria today. And that is my contribution, please.
All right. Thank you. And we seem to be getting somewhere at last. But we're not losing sight of the fact that questions have also been raised about when we began to derail. Dr. Padinjoku, I believe, stated that from the point the military started into, coming in, we began to lose it. Well, you were part of that institution.
Yes, and I'll be glad to give you the opportunity to respond. The leadership and corruption is another way of paraphrasing the national question. If you have a coconut, it has basically 3 shells. And these shells, the soft one, the hard one, and the inner one that gives you milk and soft fruits. Now I think the leadership question arises from what is underneath that bred the group that are called leaders. Yes, you can have individuals as leaders, but they have individuals who have led the goal. And the gentleman you mentioned in military history, these are individuals, but collective leadership of a nation that has a vision, has a program, has a cause, must arise from the fruits that bear them. Because no one is actually born a leader. You are bred. You may have the traits, you may have the blessing and the opportunity, to be a leader. No one is really born corrupt. It's a matter of the upbringing and the emergence of how you morally and ethically fulfill your mission within the society in which you are growing. So I think the national question, or the leadership and corruption, is one way of putting the problem. The problem of Nigerian leadership and corruption is the problem of how the fruit has been grown and what you expect from the fruit. So we cannot really talk about one without the other. I wouldn't quarrel with the professor. From my own background, I hope my methods of methodology, of analysis, will not pass your test. But I understand the problem if you have to lead people, if you have to lead a race, a community of ethnic nations, you must have certain rules by which you go by. If you have such rules called constitution, or you have such rules called party democracy, and so on, then you must go by developing them as institutions by which you can develop the security and the well-being of all the constituents that make the great Nigerian nation. So the problem of the national question is a problem that brings all these issues together with the hope that finding solutions will be finding solutions to the national question. Can we find an answer to evolving good leadership and good governance in Nigeria?
Can we do so outside the provisions of a democratic society that is free, that is just, that is equitable? These are the issues.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. We have calling in from Gombe. Mohammed. Hello, Mohammed. Hello.
Oh, good evening, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Right.
The national question. And many speakers have spoken about this national question.
What's the national answer?
Hello, Mohammed. Do we still have you there?
I, as a Nigerian, feel that part of the problem of Nigeria most of the power elite in Nigeria and the ethnic nationalities have no confidence, have no trust in the nation called Nigeria. That is why each of the ethnic nationalities led by their elite have been fighting for independence.
All right, Mohammed, it would seem that you have these long pauses. It seems to me that you're listening to yourself. But anyway, you might wish to call back later on. Let's take a short break now. When we return, we'll look at other aspects of 56 years of Nigerian independence. We've talked about the political side. We will look at the economy and see where, how far we've gone and in 56 years of independence. Stay with us on Tuesday Live. We'll be back shortly.
Nigerians, our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria, unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gains of today. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. Now, Federal Ministry of Information and Culture bring on this message.
Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying with us. It's 56 years of Nigeria's independence. Yes, in the first part, we looked at the political arithmetic and how we got here. Now, in 56 years, Nigeria has gone from, the oil boom to now that there's a recession. We've seen the days where the economy was really, really buoyant. But we have also seen a dependence on oil. Today, we ask how much progress have we made in terms of the economy and where do we go from here?
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing this aspect. And please permit me to be personal and selfish this time. Some years back, I gave a lecture in my place, in my hometown. I come from Ovoro in Imbise, in Imo State. And they wanted me to talk to the people. And I chose the topic, have you failed Ovoro? And people didn't understand that that topic was ambivalent. I was asking my hometown a question, say, Ovoro, have you failed as a town? And then I was asking every Ovoro son there, say, have you failed your mother that gave birth to you? And that raised so many questions. What have you done to improve this place? And has this particular town made progress from the time it gave birth to you? And I think that question relates to Nigeria. Have I failed Nigeria, and has Nigeria failed me? And that brings us to the issue of what we've been able to achieve in this political Nigeria in the last 56 years. That we came from a situation where one head of state was quoted one time as saying that Nigeria's problem was not money but how to spend it, to a time now when we are saying that we must sell our national assets to be able to raise money to go forward, and without asking. So those people who dissipated the previous revenues we had, if they are still there and we sell our little assets now, won't they dissipate it again? And that brings me back to of the basic values of the Nigerian polity. Our motto says unity and faith, peace and progress. Are we respecting them? Then the national ethics talk of discipline, integrity, dignity of labor, social justice, religious tolerance, self-reliance, and patriotism. How well have we respected these tenets? If we have not respected them and we are selling the little assets we have, how are we going to apply those assets and ensure that there is no more profligacy that led us to where we are today? This is my main concern today. Have I, as Padin Joko, failed this country in this country's expectation of me? In my duties as a citizen, have I failed? And of course, my expectations of this country as my own only nation in the world. Has my nation fulfilled its duties? And I think all Nigerians must be involved in this question if we are to go, as we go forward.
All right. Right, Clay.
Yeah, I think we need to situate it clearly that Nigeria started on an economic note that provided us with a sense of direction and allowed for growth, a spirit of national development that was integrated in nature, partly because we were operating fiscal federalism. You'll discover that we used to have the pyramids of groundnut in the north, cocoa in the west, palm in the east, and the Delta region, and contributed to the sustenance of the economy and driving of the process. But along the line, when the oil came in, mindful of the fact that there was a need to manage the political processes as well, and this was under the military institution, we ended up with a unitarized system, partly because of the command and control nature of the military. This affected a lot of things and the way our resources were being managed. Painfully, we have ended up with this situation where all resources end up at the center before being redistributed and not allowing for very cordial relationships to exist between the constituent entities of the Nigerian state. And this is part of the reasons why we're having agitations and self-determination quests and agenda. And you'll discover that the moment the economic sharing formula is not reflective of the area of sourcing such an economic resource, it begins to give us challenges, and that is part of why we've been having some agitations. And you've had the crisis of oil, which has now reduced to close to about 1.2 million barrels per day instead of the 2.6 million that was projected for the 2016 budgetary fiscal year. When we look at this, you'll discover that when you're talking about the economic elite and their relationship with the political elite, there are connects and there are disconnects depending on the forces at play. As it were today, part of the challenges that we're having now is that we have a schema that the intra-elite demonization and demystification that I mentioned earlier is playing a strong role that we will need to really address it clearly, that some people are now being demonized and they are saying, okay, if these are the kind of people that are demonized and demystified and they are taking their own assets out of the economy, we're having these issues. When you say you are fighting corruption, but you did not see clearly that there is a snowballing effect in terms of when you say this amount was stolen and we have traced it to this bank account, until the legal and judicial processes are fulfilled, you cannot, and nobody will be able to touch that particular vote until you dispose of the case. And that will no longer be available to. Another component of what we're dealing with is that we do not diversify and we have the capacity to engage critical stakeholders early to begin to articulate and bring us out of the crisis and challenges that we have found ourselves. I'm hoping that within the context of what we're now facing, as part of the solutions and the way forward to addressing the Nigerian national question, we will say to ourselves we need to revisit the revenue formula and the nature and character of the federalism, particularly fiscal federalism, that we will have in place. To do this, yes, we've had National Conference 2014, we've had political conference, we've had all this. There may be a need to have a study group that will take a look and bring out concisely and work with the National Assembly so that we can provide legislations and articulate even new policy frameworks that will chart the way forward. It is not about selling of assets, and I do think from the body language of the incumbent government, they are not interested in selling assets. It's just like the story of a father who is in crisis and was looking for a way to go and was told, oh, you have a 15-year-old girl, why not give it to this suitor? But somebody came back to tell him that there was another man who fell prey to such an act some years back and ended up collecting money, but the money collected did not meet all the obligations that he needed to attend to.
All right. Okay. We have more calls coming in from Abuja here. We have Ugu calling in from Abuja here. Ugu, hello. Hello, Ugu.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Yes, sir. Can I speak?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I want to just contribute that in all we are saying about restructuring and whatever, there are three major things that Nigerians want to see. And what we want to see is there should be food on the table of the people, and there should be roof over the heads of the people, and there should be mobility, and there should be power. Before you talk of anything restructuring, there must be fundamental situation that will take care of the people, that will reach to the grassroots. Every other thing we are speaking without taking the people along, it is just not working out. So the people should be taken along.
All right.
Any English we are speaking there without food, roof, and mobility and power, it is not just making any sense to us.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let's go. Yes, let's go over to Lagos, and we have put this across to Professor Akintewa. Yes, now we have to deal with a situation of getting the economy back on track, and of course, with effort being thrown into diversification. We didn't see much of that in the last 56 years, but now the challenge is that of diversifying the economy. How can the nation, looking with the benefit of its past, the benefit of its history, now forge ahead in the quest for diversifying the economy and putting it back on track?
Yeah, it can be done in many ways. If we go down the memory lane, what happened in the First Republic, for instance? The analysis of Fagbemi was super. All right, quite relevant. Recall what happened in the first decade post-independence era. There used to be a development plan. The first one was 1962-1968. Now, the approach to be followed, well articulated. The following one up to 1975, ditto. Everything was there. Now, by that time, emphasis was placed on agriculture. When we take a look at the working force and the mainstay of the economy, agriculture used to be given its pride of place. Now, since government is talking about diversification, we know quite well when some analysts say Nigeria is not the biggest country in Africa. That is very correct, especially when you want to look at Mauritania. But the bitter truth is that Nigeria has the largest area of fertile land, arable land, which means that agriculture in Africa, we have the necessary wherewithal. Now, we should look at mechanized, farming, introduce modern technology. That is how to begin to diversify. Gas, we have more gas in reserve than crude oil. But you discover that at the end of the day, we are still exporting only to re-import the finished products. There has to be capacity building at the local level. As I argued in my earlier submission here, I raised the issue of dishonesty of purpose. It is not that we don't have experts in Nigeria. It is not that we don't have people who do know how to bail the country out. But I am positing that there is the factor of conscious dishonesty of purpose. And it exists simply because of the lack of Nigerianness in the minds of many Nigerians. More significantly, now let me give you an example of why the number of people who are militating, preaching against Nigeria, against government, simply because of anger. I made an inquiry. Look at this, a situation whereby in 1994, for instance, Alhaji Lateef Jakande was Minister of Works and Housing. He placed an advert asking Nigerians, for instance, to apply for houses. Since 1994, people made payments, deposits to federal government of Nigeria. In 2016, as at this time we are talking, no allocation, no building, no refund. So when I, in my inquiries, try to meet people to say, okay, what is happening? Why are you hostile? They now say, look, this government is not serious, they don't care about them. Now, when you look at it, and the fact that government is talking about building 5,000 houses that they want to allocate in 2016, the one they collected money from in 1994, they have not done that. That's why I raised the issue of continuity. I am repositing that at the end of the day, those who are asking for restructuring, they are not against a united, vibrant Nigeria, but they are asking for restructuring in protest for the non-satisfaction of their needs, for apparent injustice. So if we are not talking about how to reposition Nigeria for the position of greatness, etc., I wouldn't see, we don't need any econometric analysis, no macroeconomic analysis. The problem is not there. Why is it that we have a dishonest attitudinal disposition towards Nigeria? Why is it that we have anti-Nigerian sentiments? If we begin to look at it from that perspective, whether the problem is political, economic, or otherwise, will at best be secondary.
All right. Well, yes, General.
He raised this issue of lack of Nigerianness and this lack of continuity. My perception of the problem is that the Nigerian economy has not been held as an economy run for the purposes of Nigerian economy per se. Rather, by the designs and objectives of a conspiratorial world that guides you to be a supplier of raw materials, basic, and therefore over time they conspire to guide the direction of your policies and limit the achievement of their expectations. What I'm saying here is that we are too tied down to the Western economies. We are too tied down to IMF, World Bank, Chicago School,
Bretton Woods
Bretton School, Ivy League policy initiators or breeders in Nigeria. These are people who come and work our system, at best destroy our planning strategic infrastructure. The colonial economy had an infrastructure that supported the ordinary farmer because they are supported with seeds, with money to plant, and the marketing chain is there. Their produce is paid for and taken to Manchester or Liverpool and so on. Now, when that system broke down, it was not retained for the purposes of growing it to build a national Nigerian economy, because the raw materials that we are going could have become the sources of our own domestic industry and manufacturing. The planning which we had, the development planning, particularly after the Civil War, if they were not derailed or discontinued, would have gone a long way. But what has consistently happened is that each time we are rich, we become profligate. We are supported by these same institutions who will advise us when the bubble bursts on how to reflate our economy. During the wealthy times, they freely give you loan, and they know these loans are not properly used. Most of the money is stolen and taken back to their own institutions, or most of the finances are used to maintain the salaries and amenities of their experts. Okay. So the point I'm really making is that now we are at the ditching point. There is no use telling us, sell one kidney, the good one, to repair the bad one. In the process, the patient is dead.
Okay. But Moses is on the line from Owerri. Hello, Moses, are you still there? Yes, thanks. Sorry that we kept you for a while. Hello, Moses. Hello.
Good evening. Thank you, sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. See one thing about the issue you're discussing. I thank you. Look at the way they discuss the breast. That now depicts from the section they are coming. From the addressing, you can know the section they are coming, which shows that Nigeria is divided on ethnic line. Again, what the general said is correct. Nigeria was negotiated. Again, look at the siting of our industry. Some areas are concentrated. For instance, like Kaduna, all the whole institutions, they were sited in Kaduna. Now, look at what is happening. Look at the present administration, the appointment. And the leader said that he will give people that give him higher percent appointment. Those people, the other section, they are not feeling happy. Look at the beauty school, the cut-off mark. Some people have 120, some people 95, 75. Then when it comes to job appointment, the same. Look at the judiciary. Some section of the country dominated in that area. One CJ, after that one, another one will come, another one will come. The other section, they are not feeling happy. This country is not one. There is a problem everywhere. There is a problem. Okay, for instance now, look at what happened at the National University, ABU and Lagos, as one of the big universities that is known in the East. We are not feeling happy over there. Get these things distributed evenly. For instance, look at what is happening about rice. Rice is not the comparative advantage of the East. Talk about the country, the East will be happy. Talk about rice in the North, they will be happy. Talk of cocoa in the East, they will be happy. Like now, when we talk about the upland rice and the swamp rice, this is an alien thing to the East people. Talk about the country for us, we will be happy. Get all these things distributed, and the whole nation will be happy.
All right.
The appointment so far is lopsided. We, the East, are not happy. Look at what General Museveni said the other time about the way how they slaughter the Igbo people. Instead of them saying that we are sorry about the war, they are now telling us how they slaughtered Igbo people. But please, Nigerian nation is not one. Look at the dressing of all the world discussers with due respect. They will tell us to ethnic differences. There is no national dressing, no national language. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Moses. Right, Dr. Pardon Joku, speaking about continuity, yes. In the past 16 years, you returned to democracy, you've moved forward so far. And here you say, how can the consolidation of a stable state now lead to more gains if you're looking at another 56 years of being independent?
Yes, I think that Nigeria is going to get better because we've been suffering from the Dutch disease. The Dutch disease is a syndrome that nations suffer from when they depend on one extractive product that they don't participate in producing, but they all participate in consuming the proceeds therefrom. It breeds, as Moses was saying, fight on distribution, on citing of this and that, nomination of that, and appointment of that. So it normally brings conflict, commotion. But now that the oil revenues are dwindling, and as General pointed out, they are now flaunting loans on our faces for us to come and take loans again and get indebted. If we can resist that, because that is a syndrome of the Dutch disease, if we can resist that and get into production where every part of the country get involved in what they are blessed by God to produce, you will see that people will now depend more on themselves than looking up to the central purse and how the contents are distributed. Now, if there are no more contents to distribute, people will look into themselves, will look up to themselves, and then that can create what you are talking about, the continuity in administration. This country amuses me. Every government that comes in calls itself this administration. They don't say government will do this. They say this administration will do this, to dissociate themselves from the previous administration. It happens in states, it happens at the federal level. But if we planted palm trees, as my friend said from Warri, if one administration planted palm trees, the next administration would like to nurture those palm trees to make sure that they grow, and the following administration can harvest them, and then there'll be continuity in government. As long as we continue depending on the proceeds of just one extractive product alone, there is going to be this hiatus, struggling to share, struggling to appoint, struggling to become the distributor. Mm-hmm. And this is part of our problem.
Okay.
And I hope that God helping us, as the oil dries more and more, our senses will swell and our intelligence will grow more and more, and we'll become self-dependent.
Right. As a fresh start, as most people would say, you have a chance to look back at how it's been this past 56 years and plot ahead so you can forge ahead in terms of building a United Nation, building one that's equitable, and of course, building a prosperous nation.
To build a prosperous nation and to have a Nigerian state that is equitable, where justice, free play is the order of the day, the first thing we need to address will be the mindset, the attitudinal and behavioral orientation. We are so concerned with quick fixes. We will need to disabuse our minds from quick fixes. And that is why, for those of us who have studied the discourse that is currently ongoing in terms of how to rejuvenate the economy, and you hear people say, oh, they want to sell assets, I say to you clearly, the government is not interested in selling no asset. From what I can read, it is clear that this government is going to be involved in loans, and loans. Already there is a Federal Executive Council, which actually by constitution should be called the Executive Council of the Federation, that has given the Federal Ministry of Finance the approval to borrow over $29 billion. We've just seen the relationship between the African Development Bank yielding globally in terms of the loan of $1 billion and then some grants and other working capital totaling $2 billion. There is already in the works the China Exim Bank of about $3 billion. But the most important thing that we need to understand, if we are going to get out of this challenge, we do not need a quick fix. If we are not going to go for quick fix, we need to go back to land, like the former Honorable Minister of Agric and Finance later on, Malam Adam Chiroma, mentioned earlier on. We need to go back to the land. To go back to the land, Professor Akiterenwa equally mentioned it, you need to go mechanized, but you cannot go mechanized. Unfortunately, the incumbent government has a party manifesto that said they are interested in engaging the youth and targeting about 20 million youth to be paid 5,000 naira. That was originally the plan. If we are going to move in that direction, we can have farm settlements, the same prototype that was in operation in Western Nigeria. The farm settlements worked. All you need to do is that we currently are having a lot of graduates coming out of polytechnics, of university without an engaging employment jobs. When we have them pulled together, the architects, the engineers amongst them will be involved in constructing the hostels that they will stay in the farm settlements. Those of them that read agriculture will be involved in the agri component of it. The ones that studied economics and business administration will be involved in the marketing of the produce. And then we can now move away from just the farming component, having the ranches, into the processing component, so that the post-harvest losses will no longer be an issue. If we can succeed with that, then you will discover that we need to now engage the institutions that we have used public funds to put in place, like the Agri Research Institutes, like the Socioeconomic Research Institutes, NISA, NIPS. I'm aware that in NIPS, and General Aruna used to be one of the arrowheads of the institute before, we have a number of research papers that have been done by NIPS that we need to activate and make sure that we understand that, yes, the government is talking in terms of taxation and tax capture of about 700,000 businesses. We will need to have all Nigerians sensitized and mobilized in this direction, so that we understand that clearly, to achieve a greater Nigeria, all of us must put our hands on deck. Everybody must have a behavioral change, an attitudinal reorientation, and this is where the National Orientation Agency comes actively to play again. And those who are in public office, I plead with you, kindly be mindful of the fact that you do not have monopoly of knowledge. You have other Nigerian stakeholders that can assist you. Engage them and do the engagement early enough so that we do not misfire.
All right, from Ondo, we have Tony calling in from Ondo. Hello, Tony. Hello, Tony.
Tony, are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead. Go on.
Hello? Okay, thank you very much. I agree with Prof and Joko.
I wish you also, well,
with every sense of responsibility that
well, it does look like we're not getting through on that line. Tony, you might have to call back again, see if it will be a lot clearer. But then going over to Lagos and putting this to Professor Akintayo, now there's a chance to forge ahead. And we'd say, how well can the Nigerian state that's been put together now stand the test of time for another 56 years of independence, going by the direction in which the current administration is moving, and talking in terms of the fight against corruption and also securing the territorial integrity of the nation?
If there is any sector of the polity that we can proudly present PMB, President Muhammadu Buhari, to the whole world, that this time he's a true fighter, quote and unquote, it is in the area of anti-corruption war. As I pointed out earlier, that BS cookie took us back to 1967 when the institutionalization of corruption started, only for us to wait until now for the dismantlement or the institutionalizing corruption. I think we are on the right path. Buhari is doing very well. Many people have argued that, he's probably focusing on some people, or that is not probing some other people. There is no way the anti-corruption war can begin with the totality of the people. It's not possible. You must begin with 1, 2, 3 before you go to 7, 9, 11, 20, 40. So in the next 15 years, 56 years, 100 years, if the virus, the cancer of corruption can be removed on a permanent basis, then there is no way that the greatness of Nigeria can be in doubt. Meaning that at the end of the day, what is militating against growth and development will have been removed. First point. The second point is that I still want to re-argue that there is the factor of dishonesty in politics. That the way we govern Nigeria is largely predicated on dishonesty of purpose. Empirical examples are there. It is not that we don't have people with sagacious mind, all right, to guide the nation. They are there. But I'm positing here that, yes, they hide, they keep the knowledge required for development to themselves for unexplained reasons. And that's why I think that in the next 56 years, forward is to intensify the war against corruption, and then to start afresh, to renew what Buhari himself started when he was military head of state, war against indiscipline. I agree with Dr. Fagbemi. You see, behavior, attitude. I have discovered that people may be against military regime, but the civilians, succeeded in militarizing themselves, while the military themselves civilianized. You know, when you have a military function in Nigeria, the civilians quickly adapt to their style. Now, let's come back to war against indiscipline. Why? So that the frame of mind of the Nigerian, people who are against Nigeria, we need to change the mindset. He said it earlier on. If you don't change the mind, I insist that it is not the policies you are going to change. You can have the best suggestions the world over. You can have the Bretton Woods.
Okay, all right, Prof. We're at the stretch of rounding off now, but there's just this last call we might take in, which is from Lagos as well. Okpoko from Lagos.
Serious Toba?
Yes.
I want to thank God for this opportunity. For Nigeria to move forward, there must be what I may call culture change. Attitude must change. Patriotic attitude must come to play. Our leaders have no patriotism. And they cannot have patriotism because the democracy we are running is called selectocracy. Government of the select, by the select, and for the select. So it is not the people that own this government. Over the period, we have been seeing leaders, and they don't have commitment for the development of this nation. How can Nigeria at 56, and then we go to election campaign, and people will be promising for light, for road? Those are the things that should have been forgotten by now. Each state, there is no single industry by each state. No local government is have any commitment of development. The only thing they are thinking about is the money for their family. And one person said that the easiest way to make money in Nigeria is to enter politics. So we must have a culture change.
All right.
And look at what our school system is. We are playing politics with our school system. And we must go back to basics so that we can produce children and people who are God-fearing.
Okay.
Who are committed.
All right. Thank you so much, Okpoko.
I believe in this nation.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for your views. And, well, gentlemen, we've just got a few minutes left on this program, and so must begin to round up now. So, General Haruna, well, we've talked about so many things. In spite of all this, those who would say, well, has the journey been worth it? Despite all these hiccups, the challenges, has it been worth it being a country Nigeria?
Yes, because we're here discussing the future. We are taking care of internally displaced persons. We are facing the high cost of instituting peace and security, taking up the challenges of those who do not want the progress of this country, our internal enemies who are citizens who have their own rights, and negotiations has to go on with them to make sure they see that there is greater future if they desist from detracting the wheels of progress and people who are progressing. I think that we should drive senses into what we do. And to do that, we have to be objective, we have to be patriotic. We are developing an economy and a society which cannot entirely depend on market forces. There must be a human face. There must be causes to provide subsidy to lift those who otherwise cannot survive. There is need to build a larger chunk of the Nigerian society within the middle class. The middle class of the society is what the weight of the elite, and they take up the burden of the more vulnerable masses.
All right.
I think there should be the balancing act, devoid of greed and corruption. Then we would know that there is more to eat. The challenges they are very clear, but we have to be committed to solving them.
Right, Dr. Padinjoku, as we head into the 57th year.
I think it can get better if we can do two things. As Professor Kinteriwan would agree with me, the people who taught us French said, "La vraie richesse est dans la terre," that real wealth is in the soil. If our people can know that they have 170 million people who can be farm hands, as my friend Kule had said, and we go back to the soil, you will see that corruption will be reduced. Because what is fueling corruption is this idea of $200 million, $300 million pouring into Nigeria's coffers overnight, and a few people sharing it among themselves, and the rest of the people remaining idle and watching, and when they get tired, they carry their guns or their bows and arrows. If we all get busy and we are producing, you will see that we will now benefit from this heavy population we have. It's a huge market, both for production and for internal consumption. And our eyes will no longer be on the budget. I mean, imagine a country where 170 million people cross their arms and be waiting for budget, and waiting for FAC meeting to finish every month, and then shamelessly you see on the screen of our television that this month the federal government, the state government, the local government have shared so much, and you don't see that much. So we should get back to production. But ethics and values, the Nigerian must repossess values. Otherwise, we become, as I normally say, manimals, combining animal instincts with human intellect and becoming more dangerous than animals, more dangerous than man. But the future can be bright if we organize ourselves very well.
Right, Kule.
In rounding up, I will want to plead with us to take note that there is a need for us to do a lot of sensitization, public enlightenment of the citizenry on the legal and policy frameworks that we do have. Because what we are calling corruption is actually malfeasance, misconducts based on non-compliance with these legal and policy frameworks. People need to know about the existence of these laws and the procedures, the rules of procedures, and standard operating principles so that we can enforce them. The other component is the fact that there is no way we are going to run away from institutionalizing fiscal federalism and redefinition of our federation system so that we devolve power and ensure that we go back to land. Agriculture is the right way to go, and once we do that, it's going to be easy for us to even activate solid minerals without too much stress.
All right, and thank you so much. And it is at this point we'll have to leave it for tonight and say thank you to our guests as we look ahead to Nigeria marching along and celebrating another 56 years ahead.
Why not?
Well, all right. So at this point, we'd like to thank our guests. We'd like to say thank you so much to Professor Bola Akintayewa, who joined us from our Lagos Network Center. Professor, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And General IBM Haruna, we thank you for being here. And Dr. Paddy Njoku, thank you, as usual.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Nigerians.
It's nice being with you here.
Thank you very much for
so much. And just a quick amendment here. I guess this was in a report, the build-up to this discussion, a slight error here where we had one or two things mixed up about who was actually the first indigenous governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. I like to believe that that was actually Mr. Ola Vincent. Yes, Malama Demuchiruma was also governor of the Central Bank at one point in time, but I guess Mr. Vincent was the first indigenous governor of the Central Bank. But that's our program for tonight. We thank you very much for being part of this. I'm Cyril Stober. Bye for now.